Shabbat Shalom. In the end of this week's parsha, Parshat Vigash, Galus Mitzrayim begins. The last pasuk in the parsha says, "Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen v'yachazuva v'yifru v'yibu ma'od." Israel settled down in Goshen and felt comfortable there and began to multiply there. Sometimes our Galus began very well. We were invited into undeveloped or underdeveloped areas. This is what happened in Eastern Europe and in America as well. And Galus began very well. Then things don't turn out so great. Sometimes, of course, the Galus began through a violent displacement of the Jews from our homeland of Eretz Yisrael. In any event, it seems clear that it was inevitable, part of the divine plan that the Jewish people would have to go through a period of galus before becoming the Jewish people. This was perhaps the main message that Avraham Avinu got in the Bris Bein Besarim, Gegir Yezarach Beretz Lo Lahem, V'achar Kach, afterwards become a great nation. It didn't necessarily have to be in Egypt, though. The Rav, Rabbi Soloveitchik, says that had things worked out differently, it could have been the galus that was described in that prophecy, could have been Yaakov Avinu's galus in Haran, when he spent 20 years or so with Lavan under harsh conditions, and then came back to Israel with Berechush Gadol. But that, if that would have been the trajectory, things would have been very different. But that didn't work out because of what happened between Yosef and his brothers, and perhaps this was never what was in the divine plan to begin with. But it's interesting that the Rav makes this point. In any event, it seems clear that for our nation to gel and to crystallize and to come together, it was necessary to begin to go through a period of exile before coming back to our homeland and taking off on our course. So there seems to be some intrinsic connection, some necessary linkage between exile and redemption, that we can't simply become a nation. We have to go through sort of a low period of exile and then be redeemed. The Maharal Miprag basically raises this issue, and it makes the same point at the beginning of Netzach Yisrael, where it also points to what seems to be a similarity in the two words in Hebrew, galus and geula. They share two words in the trilateral root, the gimel, two letters. It is the gimel and the lamed. And I'm not sure what linguists would say about his insight, but it's certainly a nice drush, as if their Maharal has this idea of things coming about from opposites. So you have to have galus, and since galus is an unnatural situation, it has to resolve into geula. Well, so much so for the national level, but how does this also apply on the personal level? Some people also have to sort of go through a low period, a period of galus, sometimes uprooting from where they were born, sometimes just going on to a different trajectory, a different lifestyle, whatever, before finding themselves and reaching personal redemption. But maybe it doesn't have to be that way. There is, however, a somewhat analogous situation that I'd like to just mention here briefly, because I like it, because it's sort of like the Jewish version of the famous, or now I guess infamous, notion of ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. This was a theory that was made in biology. It had repercussions for other areas. I forget the man who did it. But the idea is that the human embryo goes through stages, beginning as an amoeba or one cell animal, and then beginning as an animal that is as sort of a fish, enclosed in liquid, and then going to crawling on all fours, and it goes through in its own individual development all the stages that the species supposedly went through in developing into human beings. Now, whether or not this is an acceptable theory in biology or anthropology or not, I find it an interesting model for Judaism, because particularly based on the Rambam, I see that the ontogeny or the phylogeny of Avram Avinu, of going through making his personal path of discovery of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, finding God through his own reflection and study and deliberation and investigation, is something that everyone must go through on their own. The Rambam, that's why it's so critical, the difference of opinion that between the Rambam, who says that Avram found God when he was 40 years old, and the Ravid and others who say, there's a midrash that says he was 3. This is not trivial at all. It's not just a question of 2 midrashic texts. It's a question of whether someone has to go through this difficult process of reflection, thinking, studying, investigating, or whether some people are born with it and some people aren't. And the Rambam thinks that you have to go through this period, because the only way to make these true notions of the existence of God and one God your own personal belief is to get at them on your own, or through your own investigation. Even if you were taught in school all the correct traditions, there's an invaluable process of making them your own by thinking about them yourself and getting at them on your own. And so this is not quite an idea of exile and redemption, but it is a sort of a personal path of redemption that we all have to go through, and which fits into the broader scheme of the significance of Sefer Bereshit. For honor, we're almost near the end of Sefer Bereshit, and you know that the Ramban talks about Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, meaning that that the Avot actually physically went through a lot of the processes that the Jewish people had to go through. So I'll leave you with that. Ontogeny, we could place phylogeny, the history of the Jewish people, the phylum, well, not quite a phylum, but for purposes of argument, like one. Each person has to go through that same soul searching and investigation and study to make sure that the doctrines are fully assimilated into our personalities, become really a part of us. Thank you very much, and Shabbat Shalom.